to Web TV. This afternoon we have a conversation on Africa's digital economy, the telco sector, the e-commerce sector, as well as we delve into a conversation with Esther Waititu. Esther is the Chief Financial Services Officer at Safaricom PLC, and Tonny, the VP of Huawei. Thank you both so much for joining us this afternoon. Esther, I guess I'll start off with you from a Kenyan perspective. I think Safaricom is our biggest export in terms of brand. So much starting off as a telco, practically graduating into what we think is our biggest bank. Perhaps you can tell, for those who have not seen where M-Pesa is today, how would you describe M-Pesa today?
So I like the description that you've given, that we have moved from being a telecommunications company. Our aspiration is actually to be Africa's purpose-led technology company. And why do we say technology? Because the business that we're in is around connectivity. Connectivity can only happen through technology. So then let's go and look at what M-Pesa has done. M-Pesa used telecommunications as a foundation to be able to connect individuals, to be able to move money around. So that's the essence of what we're doing, connecting people, connecting their lifestyles. So for us, it's around how do we embed ourselves in people's lifestyles? How do we make it simple for them to be able to transact? So M-Pesa, if you think about it, at the heart of what it does, it connects people's financial transactions. It's also gone to the globe right now. So even as you're sitting here in Kigali, you're able to use M-Pesa. Yes. So we've integrated into over 190 countries through strategic partnerships, and we are the leading money remittance company. So I know you see us on the payment side when you're making your normal transactions, but also if you've got loved ones in the diaspora, they're able to send money back to you, and this is all enabled by technology. It's enabled by partnerships and collaborations with different partners. We've also leveraged extensively on building platforms, and it's nice that Tonny is here because working with the likes of Huawei and other technology companies, we've been able to then create an ecosystem. We work with over 80,000 developers in our ecosystem. So all the solutions that you see coming through, it's been enabled by technical experts and people who are training and learning off our system. So M-Pesa is not only just a money services ecosystem, it's also the baseline of technology, and that takes East Africa into the next.
800 developers, wow, that's...
80,000.
80,000 developers?
Yes.
That's massive.
That is massive.
From across the world?
Yes. So you have created a community of 80,000 developers.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And we'll come back to unpack some of the issues that you have mentioned. Tonny, let's come to you now. Of course, Huawei has been in the lead from a technology perspective within Africa's telco space. Perhaps you can just tell us a little bit about Huawei's presence in Africa currently and the spaces that you're playing in.
Yeah. Huawei actually, globally, we are operating in 170 countries. And in African continent, I think almost all the countries, we have the presence, we have the office, we have the network, we are supporting customers and clients. Like Safaricom is one of our customers in this continent, most successful one, and since very beginning. So I think almost all the countries that we do provide the infrastructure to telecom operators, but meanwhile also the digital solutions for vertical industries, like for government, for financial sectors, for utility sectors. This is also part of our, portfolio. Yeah.
So over the last day and a half, technology, innovation are two of the buzzwords or the keywords that have been mentioned in almost every session, whether it's agriculture or manufacturing, creative space, telco, finance. And I'm just curious from your perspective in the telco space, where are we at as a continent in terms of the digital divide, and what are your organizations doing to bridge that gap? Esther, let's start with you.
Okay, great. So this has been a fascinating session, and while Africa has made huge steps in terms of bridging that digital divide, it was very clear through the conversations that we've had throughout the last 2 days that we're not yet there. We still have quite a number of individuals who don't have access to digital tools. That has been created by a number of issues that we've discussed, and actually, which have created opportunities for us. So the very first one was around affordability. How do we collectively, as a private sector, start to bring down the cost of connectivity? So that's a very big thing for us. So it was discussed in various ways. How do we make sure that we've got handsets available, 4G, 5G enabled devices, so people can access the internet? So that's the starting point. It was interesting to see that a lot of the telecommunications companies, technology companies shared the same sentiment on the same. The other thing that we spoke about in terms of how we can bridge this is how do we work with governments? Yeah, because there is a role that regulation has played in terms of how we're able to price. And so, thinking about how we can make that more affordable, how we can consolidate our infrastructure, to make sure that things are working. It's interesting, during the day, the 2 days that we're here, we did have a problem in East Africa with the undersea cable, right? And people were able to bring it together, but that's now the scale we've gotten to, and starting to think about how do we use different technologies to enable that. The other thing that can help really bridge this divide is around sustainability. Yeah, so how do we ensure that we're using digital technology to bring down the cost of energy, yeah, right? To use less, because once it's digital, we can start to cut down the use of paper, we can reduce our carbon emissions. And so we've had interesting conversations to say how can funding partners like DFIs then help to reduce the cost of funding and make it more accessible. For those who are able to provide grants, how do we then play in that space? So those are some of the things that we spoke about, and I think will be quite pertinent in terms of bridging that divide. The big topical one was also AI, something that we're all looking to explore to make things simpler, to increase our processing power. We talked about the dangers and challenges of AI, but really it's going to be a technology that enables a lot more people to use the internet and to discover and increase our productivity.
All right, thank you, Esther. Tonny, your thoughts?
So from my perspective, I think the continent actually is doing great to improving solving the digital gap. Imagine that now the number of the smartphone users and the data usage and also the applications has been used compared with a few years ago. It's dramatically improved. Yeah. However, I think still compared with other continents, still there is a gap. Even within continents itself, there is a gap between countries. Certain countries are moving faster, some countries are still a little bit lag behind. Different reasons and different phases. So I think that's normal. But we see the development, like today's events, digital infrastructure has been get the attention by the top leaders, by the financial sectors. I mean that everybody understands how important it is. So with this kind of the attentions, definitely this will accelerate the development to solve the digital gap. So I think from Huawei side, also we're trying very hard to supporting the each country's development strategy. For example, always we're trying to bring the best technology in order to fulfill the gap, meaning that using the latest technology, spend less, either power consumption or either have the better coverage in order to give the service capability to the users. And meanwhile, also we introduce, let's say, latest, for example, the solar systems for the sites where there is no electricity available. So you can use the solar systems to provide the electricity. And also with certain countries, like even Kenya, together with the Ministry of Education, we provide smart education systems. Therefore, that for the kids in the rural area, they will have the digital schools. Yeah, so those are the solutions. On the other hand, also we are engage ourselves for the digital talent, in order to improve the people's skills, digital skills. For example, also in Kenya, last 2 weeks ago I was there, we have this digital truck. So basically it gives the basic training for the people living in rural areas will have the basic knowledge about how to use internet, how to use the smartphones, how to use the apps. So this kind of the activities to enable, not just one country, but it's a continent program, to enable the young people or even the people who are not still have the gap in terms of the competence or knowledge for the internet or for the digital skills. So those are the efforts I think we continue to do it. Yeah.
So I just wanted to add, one of the key things that also came up, just building on the piece around education, is also, the divide, say, with gender. It became quite clear that there is a disparity between females accessing the digital divide versus, the male population. There are also conversations around changing the education, like you spoke about. How do we harmonize the education, even the ways in which we teach? And with the advent of AI coming in, we can't assume education is going to remain the same. How do we work with the marginalized groups? And so this morning we had a conversation with, for example, those who are displaced. How do we still give them the dignity that they require? Those like in Sudan and in markets like that. But the big takeaway for me, which is an area that we can start to bridge the digital divide, is around how we bridge also the gender gap in terms of access to technology.
Let's talk about affordability. From whichever spaces that you sit, how much is that a factor currently in terms of how many people are able to access either mobile money or connectivity, the internet, from the very basic level? How would you rate the status of affordability of the spaces that you play in currently? And what can be done about it?
So to be fair, if you look at the average earnings of, I'll talk about Kenya, right? There's still a long way that we have to go in terms of ensuring that it is affordable. And I'd like to give a couple of examples of the initiatives that we've taken as Safaricom. So if you look at the cost of mobile data, we've been very proactive and reduced our cost of mobile data still by over 30%, right? So we still feel that we're affordable, but there's still many people who really can't afford that. But we've been, as we build scale, we're able to then make sure that the prices can come down so it's a little bit more affordable. Coming into the financial services space where M-Pesa plays, we have reduced our costs by over the cost of transactions by over 40%, right? We reduced the cost of borrowing with Fuliza, again, by a similar amount. And what does that mean? It means that we listened to the customers. The customers are saying, we want to use these services, we need to use these services, but we can't afford them at the price points that they're at. What's also interesting to see is for our transactions on M-Pesa, as an example, anything below 100 shillings on a person-to-person transaction is free. And that is the majority. It's close to 50% of our total transaction volumes today. So that does show you that if you're able to provide services at the right price point, there is a lot of appetite for consumption. So that means there's still some room for us to go. But this is also dependent on some of the things that we spoke about, which is how do we ensure that we have the right infrastructure that supports a lot of this technology? And this is where the partnerships with governments come in. How do we access the right funding so that we can pass on the benefit of this reduced funding to our customers? And so those are some of the issues that we feel are also holding the price and the cost up, and maybe removing some of our potential consumers from that market. So it's about creating scale and using technology in a very smart way in order to be able to pass on the benefits of cost.
All right, Tonny, please tell us about affordability and what Huawei is doing, from an innovative space to take care of your clients and the end user.
Yeah, I think first of all, it's as an industry player, we must always think about the providing the solution in a cost-effective way. Yeah, like you provide the better performance, but minimum cost. Not just the capex, one-time investment, but also the OPEX. For example, make your base station or make your network less power consumption as much as possible. It's for environmental protection, but meanwhile also it's OPEX. So that's something we continue to do. Generation by generation, much more powerful, less power consumption, and much compact. But not enough. Yeah. Second, I think it's also because the network itself became more and more complex. So we have to introduce the platform to make the operators or carriers to operate the network a simple way. as simple as possible, in order also to save the maintenance cost, human cost. And meanwhile, I think it's also important that we have to think about, especially for African continent, we realize certain countries that the electricity is unstable and also very high price. So like what I just mentioned, introduce the solar system could be an alternative, not just financial-wise, but also environmental-wise. So these are the solutions which we are continuous to developing. But I think talking about the consumers, there's another challenge. It's a device. Yeah? Although it's improving dramatically. Imagine that 4 or 5 years ago, I remember one smartphone, 4G smartphone, it cost $250. Nowadays, I think less than 50, even 30. So $30 one smartphone. So it's attractive enough, but for certain segment, still not. So this is something industry continue to do. But in the end, I would like to say, more important is how, with the efforts like vendors, telecom operators, vertical industries, how this digital journey can really help people increase the income. That's something I think, you have to make the cake bigger. Why we need a digital transformation? Why we need digital economy? Because this will improve the efficiency. This will bring the benefits. Benefits not just by saving, but more it's like generating revenues. So that's something I think the whole ecosystems need to, from government, from ecosystem, from everybody participant, need to think about how this can make people's life better. And then this is, I think, the future way. Yeah.
As we come to a close, I want us to talk about partnerships and collaboration, both private sector and public sector. Both your organizations have had extensive relationships, with different governments, with different organizations. And if we can mostly focus on the government side because of the policies, regulations, licensing, how do you forge, or how have your organizations forged relationships with the governments in the jurisdictions or the countries that you operate in? Esther?
None of our businesses would actually exist if we didn't have strategic partnerships. And the very first one, like you said, is we are licensed by multiple regulators. So if you look at the Safaricom business, we're regulated by the Communications Authority. For the financial services business, which is what is powered by M-Pesa, it's also governed by the Central Bank of Kenya. In certain products that we have, we also have governance from the Capital Markets Authority and now the Insurance Regulatory Authority. So part of how we have built this collaborative way of working is having regular engagements, not waiting for regulations to come out, but sitting together at the table and forging the way forward. Understanding both positions, because as you can understand from a government point of view, they're trying to protect the entire base of citizens. We also want to provide a service, so we also want to improve the livelihoods of our citizens. But it's how we come at it. So having those strategic engagements, sharing ideas, coming together in forums like this where you can, sit and say, this is a bottleneck, this is an area where we believe we can collaborate, becomes super, super powerful. We also believe that we are government's biggest partner. Because remember, the digital connectivity, the digital inclusion is not just the benefit of one sector. It cuts across. It drives e-commerce. We've seen benefits coming through in the agricultural sector where people are able to be paid earlier. We've seen innovations coming through from the healthcare sector. Like with the devastating floods that we had in Kenya, we were still able to communicate. People could still get information. If you think about getting healthcare to the remote parts of the country, again, it's using the connectivity that we have. So our partnership with government is interesting. It's that of regulation, but it's that of co-creating an environment where we can serve citizens and solve for societal problems together. It's also that of providing solutions and services. So if you think about the government of Kenya's agenda to digitize the government, they would not be able to do that without technology partners like ourselves. If you think about how collections are being done today, it's all digital and it's through M-Pesa, 22222. That allows for reconciliation. That allows for data collection. It allows for a strategic partnership. So we are not just being regulated. We're not just coexisting, but we're actually enabling each other to create opportunities for the citizens of our respective countries.
All right, thank you. Tonny, perhaps you can share with us your experience being in so many countries. How have you navigated, working around with the different governments, especially in Africa?
Let's put it this way. I think, first of all, as a vendor itself, since we are not operating the network in each country, so basically we don't involve that much in the direct communication with policymakers or regulators. However, since we are one of the most important players in the ecosystems, so we are observing each country, or each regulation, how they perform. For example, talking about the frequency. And some countries, their approach is, it's more like, okay, let's take a fee, quite high fee, and then, they may take this fee as a fund for subsidiary for rural broadband, or this. So this is one approach, high fee for the frequency, but meanwhile this fund has been used for rural broadband, white area. There's second approach. Some other approach is they charge less fee in the beginning, or they even give the instruments, but there is a higher requirement in terms of the coverage or let's say speed. So as an exchange. So that's different models. And I think each country, there is different situation, but it's there. So this is point number one. Point number two, I think we see more and more countries has, after the discussion with the industry, has more supportive approach. For example, not about money, but more about how you can simplify the process for application. For example, building a site or digging the fiber. Because if you don't simplify it, you may have a lot of procedures, applications, approvals, and which is cost money, but also timing. So from this perspective, actually, you just need to simplify a little bit the process. This will help the industry. So this is another, I think, very supportive. And of course, some countries like Egypt, for example, they have the Decent Life program, which is very helpful for rural. And there is certain fund from central government, some fund from the from local development fund, some money from the private. So this kind of the joint efforts is also, I think, more and more applicable in in African countries. Yeah, that's what we see.
All right, thank you both so much for making time to speak with us this afternoon. I have been speaking with Tonny Bao, Vice President Huawei, and Esther Waititu, Chief Financial Services Officer at Safaricom PLC. And of course, we've been looking at the status of, the telco space, the digital divide across Africa, affordability, connectivity, the skills gap as well. And we are looking forward to even more from the sessions that will continue ongoing, not just here at the Web TV, but also at the other rooms and sessions ongoing here at the 2024 Africa CEO Forum. So for now, we say goodbye, but we will be back on Web TV in just a moment, so don't go too far.